The history of the 20th century is defined by two massive and devastating wars, World War I and World War II. Together, they reshaped global politics, economies, borders, and millions of lives. The British Empire ruled the seas. The Austro-Hungarian, Russian, Ottoman, and German empires were vying for influence. Nationalism was rising, alliances were forming, and tensions were building. But how did they start? What caused such unimaginable destruction? And what lessons did humanity learn from these conflicts? Within weeks, a complex web of alliances turned a regional conflict into a full-scale global war. It all begins in the early 1900s. Europe, at the time, was a continent full of empires competing for power. In 1914, a single event lit the match. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. The war ended with the Treaty of Versailles, which imposed heavy penalties on Germany, blaming it entirely for the war, stripping it of territory, and demanding massive reparations. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Britain and France responded by declaring war. World War II had begun. World War I began. Known as the Great War, it was unlike anything the world had seen before. The Western Front became a nightmare of trench warfare. Hitler's Germany launched Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, conquering much of Europe in a matter of months. The Holocaust, one of the darkest chapters in human history, saw 6 million Jews systematically murdered by the Nazis. The war wasn't just fought with tanks and planes. It was fought in cities, forests, oceans, and hearts. France fell. Britain stood alone. The skies over London lit up with fire as bombs rained down during the Blitz. And the Soviet Union were closing in. Hitler committed suicide in his bunker. Germany surrendered in May, but the war was not yet over. The Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union began. Colonies across Asia and Africa demanded independence. The global map was redrawn and a new era began. And their stories of courage, loss, and hope continue to remind us of one thing. Peace is never guaranteed, but it is always worth fighting for. Soldiers lived, fought, and died in muddy, rat-infested ditches for months at a time. And on the other side of the world, Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, drawing the United States into the war. Economic depression hit the world hard. In Germany, the economy collapsed, inflation soared, and unemployment left millions hopeless. In that atmosphere, extreme ideologies flourished. Adolf Hitler, a former soldier, capitalized on this anger and despair. Promising to restore Germany's pride and power, he quickly rose to leadership. For the first time in history, nuclear weapons were used in war. The destruction was unimaginable. Days later, Japan surrendered. New weapons like machine guns, tanks, poison gas, and airplanes brought a new level of horror to the battlefield. More than 30 countries took part in the conflict. By the end of the war in 1918, over 20 million people had died, and another 21 million were wounded. From international laws and organizations to lessons about power, nationalism, and human rights, our world bears the marks of both conflicts. But this so-called peace only planted the seeds for the next disaster. The years between the wars were full of political chaos, especially in countries like Germany and Italy. Italy saw the rise of fascism under Benito Mussolini. Meanwhile, in Japan, militarists pushed for expansion, dreaming of a vast empire across Asia. By the late 1930s, the world was once again on edge. This war was even more deadly and widespread. In 1941, Hitler made a critical mistake. He invaded the Soviet Union. Now, the war was truly global. Battles raged across Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. By 1945, the tides had turned. The Allies, led by the US, the UK. In August, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. World War II ended with more than 70 million deaths, cities reduced to rubble, and a world left traumatized. In the aftermath, the United Nations was formed to prevent future wars. The legacy of these wars still shapes our world today. Wars this large are not just about armies and politics. They are about people, ordinary men and women who lived through extraordinary times.